welcome to Food for Thought podcast, giving you the tools and resources you need to live according to your own values of compassion and wellness, joyfully, healthfully, deliciously, and sustainably. Today's episode is Central Italian Cuisine. I'm still working on the subtitle, Agriculture and Viticulture, Olive Groves and Vineyards, Forests and Farms, and Fagioli. It's a long title, but I'm going with it. My name is Colleen Patrick Goudreau. You can find me at joyfulvegan.com and on social media. You can find my books wherever books are sold. You can join me online for my virtual vegan cooking classes, or you can join me around the world on one of my vegan trips. Thank you to everyone who supports this podcast. Food for Thought is a 100% listener-supported podcast. So if it is something you value, if it is something you love, if it's something you listen to, if it's something you share, if it's something you get anything out of, please join other supporters by going to patreon.com/Colleen Patrick Goudreau to become a supporter. Your chosen level, perks at different levels, discounts to the virtual cooking classes, bonus content, podcast transcripts, and more. And don't forget to share the love. Really appreciate all of your ratings and reviews. You can go to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts to leave ratings and reviews. And thank you for sharing this podcast with your network. If you are a supporter, you'll be getting the transcript to this episode. You can find everything you need at joyfulvegan.com. So excited about my new website, working really hard on a new website. The old one is just, when something technological gets old, it gets old. So it's been needing an update for a while, and I'm super excited about that. But you can still go to joyfulvegan.com, whether you're looking at the old site or the new site. And if you're interested in the trips, joyfulvegantrips.com. Should be pretty easy to remember. Welcome back to our culinary tour of Italy vegan style. This episode is the second in a series of 3 where we celebrate the cuisine of Italy. And I try to provide the characteristics of these different regions, the central, the southern, the northern parts of Italy, so that you can just kind of wrap your brain around, okay, generally speaking, this is what southern Italian cuisine is. Generally speaking, this is what central Italian cuisine is. Generally speaking, these are generalities, of course, but there are some specifics. And it's just so much fun to go deep and to really talk about the specific elements of all of these special regions, because every region is really incredible, really special. I love this country so much. Sto studiando italiano tutti i giorni perché amo la lingua. I love the Italian language. I've kind of joked, but it's true. My favorite language is English. I really love the English language. But my second favorite language is Italiano. And because we're going back again in June, sto studiando italiano tutti i giorni. It is a lot of work, but I have been working really hard studying the language, listening, really practicing my listening. I can read Italian pretty well, but oh my gosh, listening is just, it's wonderful. I love it. So we are going back in June. We're going to Toscana. We're going to the central part, and we're also going to northern Italy. We have 2 trips running. Northern Italy is totally sold out. Tuscany has just a couple spots left. And what are you waiting for? These trips are incredible, and you get to experience all this cuisine we're talking about. The first episode, Pasta, Pizza, and Produce, was on southern Italian cuisine. Basically think pasta, pizza, and produce when you want to generalize the South. And when you think of Southern Italian cuisine, think of Italian-American cuisine, because Southern Italian cuisine was really the precursor to Italian-American cuisine, since the south of Italy is where most Italians emigrated from when they came to the United States, especially after World War II. So just to remind you, the regions in southern Italy are Puglia, Apulia, Basilicata, Calabria, Campania. We spoke a lot about Calabria and Campania especially, and Sicilia, Molise. So Apulia, Basilicata, Calabria, Campania, Molise, and Sicilia, Sicily. Today we go to central Italy, and then we'll end the series in the north, in northern Italy. As you may remember from the first episode, as a unified nation, Italy is a newer country than the United States. I mean, obviously we talk about ancient Rome, but as a unified country, Italy has only been a unified country since about 1861, 1862, and having been disparate city-states until then for thousands of years, that is why we have these very specific regions with their own history and their own flavor, no pun intended, their own personality. One of the culinary benefits of this fact, of this history, is that the different regions created and perfected and honed and held onto their food traditions for a very long time, and they still honor them. What we eat and how we cook and how one seemingly similar dish differs from one region to the next. These are all ways we distinguish ourselves from others, right? Even if we're just next door. So that's what's happened in Italy. And these traditions, these culinary traditions, then get passed down from generation to generation over the centuries. That's what makes them traditions. And certain characteristics of the region's dishes get locked in. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So that's one reason why the cuisine of Abruzzo is this. The cuisine of Toscana is this. The cuisine of Liguria is this. It's because of the history of this country having been city-states, not just one unified country for so long. Obviously, much longer than they've been a unified country. The second and third reasons we have such different cuisines from region to region, we talked about this a little bit, well, not a little bit, we talked about this a lot in the Southern Italian episode, is climate and topography. These are the second and third reasons. So the South has a very hot climate and rich volcanic soil because of Mount Vesuvius, and thus it's able to grow a wide variety of vegetables and tomatoes for eating and tomatoes for sauce and grapes for wine and citrus for eating and drinking. Olives for eating and for oil, right? So you think about the climate, you think about the topography. As we get farther north, and you'll hear about this when we get to the far northern regions, the climate and topography are dramatically different especially from the south and even from some parts of central Italy. The last reason, the fourth reason there are such different cuisines from region to region has to do with what other cultures those regions had contact with or proximity to. Because of trade, could be immigration, because of shared borders, it could be occupation, right? In the Southern Italy episode, we talked about the fact that generally speaking, the Arabs, the Greeks, the Spanish, they ruled Southern Italy for centuries off and on. And so the food of those cultures are very much reflected in Southern Italian cuisine. You have tomatoes, first of all, right? Tomatoes and tomato sauce strongly associated with the South, marinara sauce and pizza. What happened because of the contact with the Spanish who brought the tomato from the New World in the 15th, 16th centuries. And because Naples was a major port in the Middle Ages, it was a gateway for the entry of many cultures and cuisines like the telltale North African and Middle Eastern ingredients, couscous, raisins, almonds, pine nuts, apricots, citrus, rice, saffron, nutmeg, cloves, pepper, cinnamon, all those spices. They came from the Arab cultures, the North African, Middle Eastern, right? So that greatly influences the cuisine. Now, I would say the South and the North are probably the most dramatic in terms of their contact with other cultures. The central part is benefiting. You know, the central part of Italy is basically straddling the South and the North. So they're taking some from the South, they're taking a bit from the North, and a lot of central Italy they were papal states, so that has an impact on the cuisine and the culture and the history. Well, obviously the history, but the people today. So, but as far as the cultures that touched the Italian city-states, the regions we have today, I would say it was most dramatically in the South because of the cultures I just mentioned. And in the North, you've got Switzerland and Austria and Germany. In the central part, they're kind of getting everything from both the South and the North. So, you know, in short, while you can make generalizations about Italian cuisine, we say that we're going to an Italian restaurant, right? It is very much defined by the individual regions themselves. I don't think Italians would understand when we say Italian cuisine. It's too general. It's just too general. But obviously, when we think of Italian cuisine, we think of ravioli and spaghetti and tomato sauce and pizza, right? Okay, sure, we can make those generalizations, but each gastronomy tells the tale. Each region's gastronomy tells the tale of geography and topography and climate and soil and people and trade and history and the land itself. So we're not talking about Italian cuisine here. We're talking about Central Italian cuisine today. So I invite you to listen to the Southern Italian cuisine episode. I've referred to it a couple times here. I won't do that too much more in this episode, but go listen to that episode. And now let's start moving north from the south to what is considered the central part of Italy. Now, this comprises many famous regions. I would say the most famous region is Tuscany, Toscana. You've got Umbria. You've probably heard of Umbria. You've got Lazio, Abruzzo, and Le Marche. So Toscana, Umbria, Lazio, Abruzzo, and Le Marche. Now, I talked a little bit about Abruzzo in the southern Italy episode, but I didn't really talk about it much. And as I mentioned in that episode, Abruzzo was once a single region along with Molise. It was Abruzzo Molise. So Molise is decidedly southern, but as Abruzzo is just north of Molise, it kind of walks the line between central and southern. So I'm personally putting it in the central part. You might find some people who put it in the south. This is not a life or death decision, so I'm just making the decision, and I'm grouping it here with the other central Italian regions, just like I grouped Sicilia with the south, rather than giving it its own separate episode. That's my choice. Everyone's going to have their own opinion. This is mine. Now, we're going to drill down into the fabulous cuisine of the specific regions of central Italy: Toscana, Umbria, Lazio, Abruzzo, and Le Marche. And I'm sure one or two of these are more familiar to you than the others, which is why we're going to have so much fun, because obviously I'm learning while I'm doing this as well. There's so much to say. I mean, gosh, there's so much to say about all of this. But let's talk, before we drill down into the specific regions, let's talk about some broad general characteristics of these central regions as a whole, especially as we compare them to the south, because that's going to be helpful, right? What can we say about central Italy as compared to the south, as compared to the north? That helps a bit in terms of orienting ourselves, right? And that's going to help you wrap your brain around what distinguishes one from the other. After all, if there weren't distinctions, I wouldn't even be able to talk about it this way, but there are distinctions. I called the Southern Italian cuisine episode Pizza, Pasta, and Produce for a reason, right? That doesn't mean there's not pasta or pizza or produce in the other regions. It's just to say that these foods characterize that area, right? The southern Italy. I could have just said trade. I could have just said trade and contact with other cultures. I mean, that's something that really characterizes Southern Italian cuisine. But I'm just trying to give you a broad picture for all of these regions, well, all of these the higher level, the southern, central, and northern, so that you can just go, oh, okay, just generally speaking, if I'm eating ravioli, I know I'm in the north. If I'm eating polenta, I know I'm in the north. If I'm eating pizza, I know I'm in the south. If I'm eating, well, we'll get to central. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to do here. Is we're going deep and we're going into the specifics about the food in the individual regions. But I also want to give you some generalizations. And that's why, my title is so long, because I could have just talked about beans or olives or wine or bread. I mean, so in trying to whittle this down, that's the exercise for the day. First of all, let's look at the weather, the climate, the topography of central Italy. Whereas the south gets very hot, the weather as we get to central Italy is more moderate. It's a little more temperate. Now, Tuscany and Umbria and other central regions do have hot summers, especially on the coasts and in the valleys. July and August could be as high as the high 80s, right? But that's still not as hot as 100, 110. This is all Fahrenheit in Sicily in the south, right? Summers in central regions are hotter and longer than those in the north, but not as hot as the south. So consequently, tomato-based dishes are more common here than they are farther north. But at the same time, the winters are chilly, especially inland, 40s, 50s, plenty of rain in the winter, making it possible to grow leafy vegetables, right, that reach their best after frost, right? Like lacinato kale, like Tuscan kale, dinosaur kale, right? So that's an example of how the chillier winters post-frost allows for things to grow here that wouldn't grow well in the south. Now, central Italy also has a rich specialty farming tradition with many crops that are difficult to find elsewhere, including Faro. Faro, we'll talk about Faro, and Saffron, Zafferano. So we'll talk about those when we get to those specific regions. But this idea of specialty farming is something unique to central Italy and farming in general. When we think of Tuscany, I think we think of these rolling hills and olive groves and vineyards, grapes growing for winemaking, olives growing for olive oil. Well, these are agricultural crops. This is why one of my titles for the episode is viticulture, which is the growing grapes for winemaking, and agriculture, right? So planting crops for consumption. Obviously, there's some foraging that happens. We'll talk about that as well. But, oh God, that would be a really good one. Farming and foraging. I think that has to be part of the title. I might change it. That has to be part of the title. Farming and foraging is kind of characterizing this region here. And so agriculture, viticulture, it's kind of same thing, right? Specialty farming, sure. Like all of that is kind of what I think about when I think of central Italy. In fact, when I think of central Italy, aside from thinking about the biggest and most important city in this area, I think of farming and agriculture. Like that's what I think of. And unfortunately, something that comes with that a bit is hunting, la caccia. Sadly, hunting is legal in Italy. And unlike in the United States, where there are different hunting seasons depending on where you are and what animals you want to kill, in Italy, hunting is year-round. The majority of hunting, about 70% of the hunting, takes place in Italy in the central and northern areas of the country, with Tuscany and Umbria and Sardinia. But in this region that we're in, Tuscany and Umbria, they're the most popular regions for hunting, which is why, if you're paying close attention, you would have heard the part of a name of a famous Italian dish from central Italy that's known maybe the world over, definitely in the United States, and that is cacciatore, chicken cacciatore. As I prefer to speak of it, eggplant cacciatore. I said paying close attention because I said caccia, which means to hunt, hunting. So cacciatore means hunter or huntsman. This dish originated in central Italy. It was a cacciatore. Cacciatore was a culinary dish that was once known as hunter's chicken. I can say cacciatore alla cacciatore. That's why I can say eggplant alla cacciatore. It is the Italian version of a culinary phrase. It actually occurs in other languages as well, meaning huntsman style. So you have huntsman style in other languages as well, with their words for hunter. Here it's cacciatore. And this huntsman style dish, which is the case also in these other countries, in these other, France, I'm thinking, and Portugal, for instance, it usually indicates the presence of forest mushrooms. So forests are obviously here in central Italy, especially in Umbria. But as much as I'd like to say that the name cacciatore comes from the fact that hunters were hunting mushrooms, that's just not the case. I wish that were the case. So why is it called cacciatore? Why cacciatore? Were they hunting chickens? I don't think so. So the story goes that as far back as the 1600s, the dish was associated with the hunt, the hunting of wild animals. Developed in central Italy, it was a dish prepared by hunters on the trail. And it featured hunted animals such as rabbits, deer, pheasants, wild boar, animal flesh, which we call game animals, as we say. It's a whole interesting history about why we call them game animals. Another episode. But these are game animals in the sense that their flesh tends to need a long time to braise, to become edible, to become tender. And so to help temper the gaminess of the flesh in making these dishes, they would forage on the way back from their hunt. They would forage ingredients that kind of tempered that gaminess, like forest mushrooms, like juniper berries, like wild herbs. So returning from the hunt, the hunters would gather up the mushrooms, gather the fresh herbs, and they would use them in the sauce along with their animals. And so I guess they were mushroom hunting. So let's just manifest that someday people will look back. This is what I'm going to create for us. Someday people will look back and say, wait, we call it cacciatore because we forage for mushrooms. We go mushroom hunting to get all of the components for the main components for this dish. What? Back when they hunted animals? That's crazy. That's what I'm going to manifest. That someday people are going to say that about us hundreds of years from now. What? That's why it's called cacciatore originally, because they were hunting animals. Now, I don't think they were hunting chickens. I just don't think that in the Middle Ages they were hunting chickens. There weren't wild fowl in the forests of central Italy. They just weren't there. So chances are cacciatore was most likely first made with pheasants or rabbits. And as time went on, people were raising chickens for consumption and chickens became the predominant flesh. See how things change? And then we think about it only in that one way, but actually it was something else. We don't think of pheasant cacciatore. No one says that, right? I mean, I'm sure some people do, but that's not the common phrase. It's not the common dish that we think about when we think about cacciatore. So someday, I don't think it's that crazy that we're going to look back and go, what? Hunting animals? I'm just saying. Just putting that out there. So today you've got chicken cacciatore, but for our vegan version, we'd have eggplant, and eggplant cacciatore is a thing in Italy, and you may not be surprised to know that how it's made depends on the region you're in. So typically it's made up of roasted eggplant, simmering in a light wine tomato sauce with mushrooms. That's kind of what I think about when I think about eggplant cacciatore. But some people don't add mushrooms. Some people do. Some people use white wine, mostly in the north. Some people use red, mostly in the south. Some people don't use wine at all. In the north, the Ligurians add olives. In the south, where you remember there are lots of tomatoes, they use both fresh and sun-dried tomatoes. In Tuscany, they rely on the woodsy, pungent, locally grown herbs such as sage or rosemary. In short, there is no definitive way to prepare this dish. You use what is available to your region and the ingredients that are available, the way Italians roll. But this dish, cacciatore, was born in central Italy. So all that's to say is the food of central Italy reflects the agricultural and wild treasures provided by that temperate climate and the presence of forests and these hills, right? So you've got this simple, rustic cuisine. I think a lot of regions consider their cuisine simple and rustic, but it's characterized by the ingredients that dominate the region. In central Italy, we've got the fruity olive oils of Tuscany. That's what you think about when you think about the flavors of central Italy. The black truffles of Umbria, the fragrant saffron of Abruzzo, the artichokes of Lazio. So we're going to get to these specifics. But with those generalities in mind, let's dig into the specifics. Let's start with our first region. Let's start with Abruzzo. I said that some people characterize it as a southern region, and it is the most southern region of most of our other central Italy regions. Lazio kind of drops down a bit. a bit south. But let's start in Abruzzo because it is one that straddles, definitely straddles the south and the north. Now, something you may have come across related to wine labeling, you may have heard of something called DOC or DOP. There's European labeling, there's Italian labeling. In Italy, there's labeling for wine, but not just for wine, for other produce as well. And DOP stands for Denominazione d'origine protetta. In English, this translates to protected, protetta, designation, denominazione, of origin, d'origine. DOPs are not just for wine, so they're for other agricultural products as well. And in Abruzzo, you have several of the region's most celebrated treasures. Many of them have their own DOPs. So what does DOP mean? What does it mean to have that labeling? It means that you fall under a very strict set of guidelines and criteria to label your product that it's a strict labeling of food in Italy meant to preserve and protect regionally produced foods from less superior versions. So some DOPs in Abruzzo include carrots. Yes, there are carrots that are protected in Abruzzo by these standards. You've got lentils that are also DOPs, and you've got saffron, which is a DOP. So the Italians are not kidding around when it comes to protecting their regional produce. In addition, in Abruzzo, you also have chili peppers, you have tomatoes, and you have artichokes growing in abundance. And the region does produce a really lovely fruity olive oil. So olive oils in obviously a lot of Italian regions. One of the most famous foods, as I've said now a couple times from Abruzzo, is saffron, zafferano, which is taken from the stigmas of the saffron crocus, this flower, and it's a culinary gem, right? It's just incredible. It's also called oro rosso, so red gold, oro rosso. And it is. It's gold. It's just incredible. It is a lucrative crop. It is an expensive product, but it is labor intensive. That is why it was first introduced into the region around the 13th century, imported from Spain. It was prized as an exotic spice. It still is. It was sold in the wealthier regions, in the cities of Milan and Venice, and abroad as well. But it is so labor intensive. If you haven't ever seen how saffron is made, I really encourage you to just go Google it or watch a video, because quite literally the flowers have to be hand-picked. You have to gently remove the beautiful red stamens from the buds. You have to then dry them. It takes about 4,000 flowers to make 1 ounce of saffron powder. So it is worth it though. It's worth the spending a little extra money for the really good stuff. There are some kind of just not so good stuff out there. So if you see saffron and it's cheap, it's not the good stuff. You know the good stuff as soon as you open up that little tiny baby jar and you just smell it. It's so special. And it's one of those spices that a little goes a long way, like a lot of spices, to be honest. So you don't need very much. So even if you buy something that's really, above your budget or above what you would normally spend for something like this, honestly, if you get what I'm imagining probably an ounce, that will probably give you 3 or 4 dishes, like full dishes, like making a whole stew or a whole soup or what have you. So it's worth it, all I'm saying. So in Abruzzo, saffron is the main representative, culinary representative of this area. Even though, of course, it's exported, it's eaten elsewhere in Italy, but in Abruzzo, it's about saffron. I mentioned in the Southern Italy episode that the region of Abruzzo is also known for its strong flavors, such as peperoncino, a hot red pepper. It's used to flavor many dishes. It's part of favorite sauces, like for pasta. You've got a very famous pasta dish called aglio, olio e peperoncino. I mean, you have a lot of that in central Italy, basically just garlic, oil, and peperoncino, just a hot red pepper. Another famous pasta from Abruzzo is spaghetti alla chitarra, which is also known as macaroni alla chitarra. And chitarra means, guitar, means guitar. It's a type of spaghetti, so a long strand pasta that is made on a special guitar-like instrument. When you're not on a joyful vegan trip, you will find that this pasta is made pretty much all the time with chicken's eggs. So check first or ask first, but I think you'll find that. We talked in southern Italy. Remember, not all pastas are made fresh. Not all pastas are made with eggs. In the south, most pastas are made without eggs. As you get farther north, you see more pastas being made with eggs, and this is an example of that. It tends also to be made with a ragu, which is a meat-based tomato sauce. But when you make it at home or when you come on a joyful vegan trip, you can make it with plant-based meat. And of course, and I'm not just saying that on a joyful vegan trip, we work with chefs and we work with restaurants in the regions we go to make sure that we're getting vegan versions of regional, delicacies. Also something to think about as a way of roughly distinguishing the South from the North is the use of tomato sauce on pasta. Tomatoes in the South, tomato sauce in the South, used in abundance, right? But less so in the North. Not never, but less so. The best tomatoes come from the South, right? But as you get farther north, you see them used less frequently. Again, not never, but less frequently, because they obviously import from parts of Italy as well. But you see them used less frequently on pasta dishes. So it's just a way to kind of think generalization about the differences between the South and the North, especially from the South to the North, right? Abruzzo straddles both. So you're seeing that example of like some, ragu and tomato sauces in their pasta. But it's just a marker I hope might be helpful. Other traditional dishes from Abruzzo are scripelle. They're crepes in broth. I'm actually working on some recipes right now, and I'm really excited because I'm working on crepes in broth. I have never had them, but they sound so intriguing that I need to make them. You also have zuppa di lenticchie, which is lentil soup, and another pasta dish, pasta alla pecorara, which is shepherd's pasta. It's another traditional pasta dish originating in Abruzzo, with a vegetable-based sauce. You've got red peppers, eggplants, zucchini, carrots, onions, tomatoes, olive oil. So you've got a lot of vegetable-forward dishes. That is not to say that animal-based meat dishes are not widely consumed here in Abruzzo or in central Italy. They are. But that's not what I'm here to talk to you about. When there's a famous dish I think you might want to know about that you can veganize, like I mentioned, the Cacciatore, a couple that I've already mentioned here, I will let you know that. But I am not here to emphasize all the animal-based dishes from central Italy. You can go somewhere else for that if you want to know. And for seafood too. Abruzzo has some coast on the Adriatic, so you're going to see a lot of aquatic animals being eaten here, but not here, not now, not with me, not today. So you can go somewhere else if you want to hear about all the meat and seafood dishes in central Italy, in Abruzzo. So in general, there are dishes unique to Abruzzo, but what characterizes the food here is, again, this kind of rustic simplicity of the central part of Italy. Well, Italy. I think when you get up north, it gets a little different, but I think southern and central are similar in that kind of rustic simplicity. You hear that a lot about a lot of regions in both of these areas. But think saffron when you think of Abruzzo. But let's move on now to another central region to demonstrate this rustic simplicity, and that's Le Marche. Le Marche is the only regional name that is plural, so M-A-R-C-H-E, Le Marche. It was derived from the fact that historically this land, which was also part of the Papal States, but it was divided and ruled by a lot of local lords, the Marquis, right? In Italian, Marchese. So that's how you get the name Le Marche. And it was, having been ruled by these lords, it was filled with wealthy landowners. And as such, unsurprisingly, it means that you've got a fondness for animal-based meat in this area, which has always been a sign of luxury. As I have said again and again, meat has always been a sign of luxury. Animal products have always been symbols of wealth and affluence. And Italy is a perfect example of that fact. The fact that plant foods, vegetables, fruits, grains, legumes have always been the food of the poor, not the rich. Animal flesh, animal fluids, animal ferments have always been for the rich or the richer than the poor, right? And this is the case in Le Marche as well. And because it, like Abruzzo, also has a coastline along the Adriatic, you'll find that aquatic animals are sadly consumed in abundance here as well. But you will not hear details about that today. Today, we're going to talk about plant-based options in this region. Well, actually, that's not true. So think about vegetables. I mean, vegetables were very common. I shouldn't say vegetables were very common. The traditional diet in Le Marche was almost exclusively vegetarian for the vast majority of the population living inland, right? And fish played a part in the coastal cities, but mostly people were eating vegetables because, yes, you have this disparity between the rich and the poor, as in so many examples. And so the rich, they were eating lots of meat, but the general population, they were eating plants. They were eating vegetables. So generally speaking, just consider that when you're thinking about Le Marche, lots of vegetables as part of their diet. Now, there are some foods that are specific to this region. One is a meat dish that I'm going to mention because I think I'm working on a recipe to actually veganize this as well. And if we ever go to this region and we do this on a joyful vegan trip, I will make sure we find this. And I'm sure there are restaurants and people who are making this. I'm sure online there are people who are making this. A vegan version of this. And that is a famous antipasti. Remember, antipasti is kind of your first, kind of small bites before you have your first course in Italy. I'm actually going to do an episode on how Italians eat, because we eat very differently in the United States than in Italy. It's one of the things I enjoy very much, although I get very stuffed very quickly. And it's one of the reasons when you go to Italian restaurants, either here in the United States or wherever you're listening from, any Italian restaurant you go to, and when you eat in Italy, the antipasti, you're always going to find lots of plant-based options. Primi, you're always going to find plant-based options. As you get to secondi, the second course, it's a little harder because they tend to be a bit meat-focused, but that's why I thought it would be really interesting to talk about how Italians eat so that we can, because it's really fascinating and because we can see how different it is from how we eat, but also so that it helps you understand, that's why it's not so hard to eat vegan in Italian restaurants. Depending on if you're eating in an Italian restaurant that focuses more on Mediterranean or on Southern or Northern. That's what I'm talking about here. That's how different it is. So this famous antipasti here in this region is olive all'Ascollana, basically stuffed olives. Olives, it translates to olives from Ascoli. I think you might find, as you're listening to this episode and others, how much, and this just emphasizes why I'm doing these episodes, why I'm doing this series, how much in the name of a dish, the region or the city or the province or the town or the village is in the name of the dish, because that's the point. It's distinguishing itself from another region. So olive all'Ascollana is olives from Ascoli, right? Now they're meat stuffed green olives. They're battered, they're deep fried, and they're kind of all over this region. And these olives do have their own protected designation of origin. They're denominazione d'origine protetta. Now, this kind of thing can be veganized. Like I said, I'm working on an episode, but when you're out and about in Le Marche, I think it might be harder to find, but stick with me. So when you're thinking about Le Marche, think about vegetables, think about olives. You're going to have a lot of overlap with some of the regions close by. You're going to have wild fennel. You're going to have mushrooms. You're going to have truffles. And we'll talk about those things in some other regions here. But animal flesh, it does appear more frequently than it did in the past. But let's really think about all of the wonderful produce from central Italy when we think of Le Marche. Okay. Let's move over back to the west a bit, away from the coastal regions of Abruzzo and Le Marche to Lazio. It's a largely flat region with rolling hills, and it's next because it's the most southern of the central regions just west of Abruzzo. And you can look on a map to see what I'm talking about. Drops down a bit toward the southern regions. And while you probably know the most famous city in this region, Rome, I don't know if have you heard of the larger region? I don't think a lot of people know of Lazio, right? Toscana, Tuscany has the best PR firm. I don't know when they started work, the best PR firm because everybody's heard of Tuscany, and you've probably heard of Umbria, and you've probably heard of Lazio. But I think it's interesting because I think where most people know the region of Tuscany, how many towns in Tuscany can you name? You probably can, but You know what I'm saying? Right. And while you've heard of the city in the region of Lazio, you've heard of Rome, can you name other towns or villages or cities in Lazio? Right. Now, for the record, before writing this episode, I could not have named other cities in Lazio. And I've been to Italy several times and I study Italian and I watch a lot of Italian history and Roman history. I couldn't name another town in Lazio, but I just think it's fun because we know Tuscany as a region, but we don't know, not a lot of people. I think you can name some towns, to be honest. So you can name some towns like San Gimignano, Florence, and Siena, and Pisa. These are very famous towns as well. I'm just trying to make the point that we know the city in Lazio, but we don't really know Lazio as well. We can't name other cities, and we might know the region really well when it comes to Tuscany. But like, you know, when people get drilled down to the individual towns, when I say people, I guess I'm speaking mostly for Americans because we don't live in Italy, and that's totally fine. But just to show you how much Rome has dominated the Lazio region, no city comes close. No city comes close. So even recently, in 2021, the population of Rome was almost 3 million. The next largest city after Rome is Latina with a population of 126,000. So you've got 3 million people in Rome compared to the next largest city in Lazio, and that's 126,000. So you can really see the difference. And by the way, those towns that I mentioned, some of these towns are towns we visit on our Tuscany trip. So our vegan villa that we stay at in Tuscany, it just sits right across from San Gimignano. So you see this incredible view. Every night we have this incredible view, every day, of San Gimignano, this medieval hill town just across from the vegan villa. It's kind of amazing. And we go to Siena, and there's also Pisa, as I mentioned. And we go to Volterra, which I'm going to tell you something. Volterra became my favorite place on our last trip. Volterra. We're not talking a lot about Volterra today, but yeah, Volterra. I love it. Okay, so the cooking of Lazio. The cooking of Lazio is in many ways the cooking of Rome. That city has dominated the region for thousands of years, and as a result, it has become the depository of all of Lazio's local culinary traditions, including that of the Roman Jewish population. There's a considerable Jewish influence in Roman cuisine. Many Jews lived in the city, and some of the traditional meals date back over 400 years. One of them is carciofi alla Giudia. That means Jewish-style artichokes, carciofi, and Jewish courgettes, zucchini, as well. Dominate. Like you can find them everywhere. Carciofi alla Giudia, artichokes Jewish style. It's among the best known of dishes of Roman Jewish cuisine. And it's essentially deep fried artichokes using Romanesco artichokes. There's lots of different artichokes, but the artichokes here are Romanesco, right? And it originated in the Jewish community of Rome. Judeo was the Roman dialect term for Jew. So you have carciofi alla Giudia. There's also carciofi alla Romana, whereby artichokes are, it's really lovely. Artichokes are filled with minced garlic and parsley, and then they're kind of braised in olive oil, and absolutely yummy. I do have a recent video, I think it's on Facebook and Instagram, and I just show how to steam an artichoke. I mean, we're talking about some pretty, right here we're talking about like, kind of pulling away the leaves and like stuffing it in. This is just how to steam an artichoke and then how to eat an artichoke, because not a lot of people do and they're intimidated by it. So I do have a video. It was quite popular. People were really thrilled about it. And then what was lovely is that a lot of people started sharing their family recipes and traditional recipes for artichokes. So much to do with artichokes, especially stuffing them. And obviously they're such pretty flowers. One of the things that I love so much when we grew artichokes, we're not growing them now, but when we grew artichokes, it was so difficult to cut them when they started like flowering, because they're so beautiful. Like I wanted them to flower. So you have to cut them before they flower to get the edible aspect of the artichokes. But if you let them go to flower, they are just the most beautiful flowers. So artichokes. The region, like in Tuscany, you find this as well, but it has some of the best farmland. This is why I was calling this episode, agriculture, farmland. I wanted to call it farms and fagioli. farms and beans. So, because I like alliteration. So it has some of the best farmland. The produce is amazing. The artichokes we talked about. You've got your olives, you've got your olive oil, you've got peas, you've got fava beans, you've got chicory, you've got salad greens. So a lot of beautiful produce in Lazio, in Rome, in Roman cooking. Now, the fat from pigs is often used for frying, so just make sure you ask, right? When in Rome, don't do what the Romans do, because they fry some things in pig fat. So ask for, get it? Like when in, okay. So when you are ordering something, just ask if it's an olive oil or prosciutto, because sometimes they fry it in prosciutto. And speaking of another aspect of Roman cuisine that's not so pretty, there is an ancient cuisine still popular today called quinto quarto, fifth quarter, quinto quarto, and it means the less noble parts remaining from animal slaughter, such as pig's feet and brain and genitals. I'm just the messenger here of other animals. And all of this would have been destined for the poor who couldn't afford, I guess you'd say, the more appetizing parts. I mean, it really is true. When I ate animals, I didn't eat their snouts and their brains and their genitals. I ate what was kind of, accepted, socially acceptable. So yes, like all of the parts of the animal being used, okay, but I think what's better than that is not using any animals at all. But I'm just telling you that this is something, if you hear when you're in Rome, you might hear this quinto quarto. Just want to tell you what it was. So let's get back to the edibles. Rome's most common pasta shape is spaghetti. And there are other pastas eaten too, like bucatini and rigatoni, but spaghetti is the most common shape. I mentioned bucatini in the southern episode. It hails from Lazio. So bucatini, spaghetti, and as you're kind of hearing these strand pastas, we talked about a little bit in the other regions. So these long strand pastas, whereas the South had a lot of these shapes. Here you're getting a lot of long strand pastas, right? So bucatini, I mentioned, is a cousin to spaghetti. They're these thick, hollow strands, and they're super fun because like the sauce gets into the little holes, but it's kind of fun to eat because, with spaghetti, you can slurp it because you can just like put it in between your lips and you can slurp it in. Well, bucatini's hollow, so you can't do that. So it's kind of funny because like you go to slurp it, but it's like, it's not going anywhere because it's hollow. But it's fun. So I love bucatini. It's really fun if you haven't tried bucatini. And by the way, when I talk about pasta dishes in Italy, I'm not talking about pasta dishes the way Americans know pasta dishes. Pasta, overcooked, oversauced, huge portions, right? I rarely eat pasta at home. The only time I really enjoy pasta is when I'm in Italy. And like, I'm not going to make any pretense. I wouldn't even be able to make pasta the way they do in Italy. I'm sure I could if I tried more, but I don't try. It's just not one of my favorite things in the world. David loves it. David loves pasta. So when I don't cook, that's his go-to meal. He makes pasta, and he loves making different pasta dishes, different sauces for pasta. Now, if you're a pasta lover, like, just don't think you're doing something wrong by buying dried pasta. Because I know, like, we're talking about, like, the cuisine and making food. Right? But no, dried pasta is absolutely acceptable. Italians don't all make their own fresh pasta every time they eat pasta or order pasta, right? So there are dried pastas. And most of the pastas that we know, or I shouldn't say most, but there are some famous brands that we know because they've been imported to the United States, and they're perfectly acceptable brands like Barilla. Barilla is probably the most well-known dried pasta brand. It's still owned by Italians, and it's good. I mean, and because of Italy's rigid government controls for many of their food products, you've got that with Italian dried pasta. It's made under rigid controls from hard Durham wheat flour, and so you know that the standards are going to be high. So you just have to look on the box and see if it's from Italy. The Durham wheat flour we discussed in the Southern Italian episode that remember that came from the Middle East, right? And so this is another example of this particular kind of harder flour, the harder wheat that makes it better for pastas. These kinds of pastas, at least, especially the dried pastas. So semolina, it's called semola di grano duro, Durham wheat flour. flour, but in English it's just semolina. So if you're looking for other Italian brands besides Barilla, you can order online. You've got one from Abruzzo. It's a very well-known one next to Barilla, and that's Rustichella d'Abruzzo. So I've seen this many times in local shops. It's in a bag as opposed to a box, and it's very good. It's woman-owned. And there are others as well. There's Martelli from Tuscany near Pisa. You've got Latini from the Marche region. So you've got a lot of pastas made from the central Italian regions. And if you want to try them, I encourage you to order them online or ask your specialty store if they can order them for you. So as far as how pastas would be dressed in Rome, in Lazio, they tend to be simple. Again, aglio e olio, and arrabbiata, the spicy red sauce that's it's just basically made with tomatoes and garlic and olive oil, red chili peppers. Absolutely my favorite is arrabbiata. So that's definitely from this region. Now you do have a lot of famous pasta dishes that are from Rome. And many of them are meat or egg or cheese-based. You've got spaghetti carbonara that's made with egg yolks and parmigiano and pancetta. You've got cacio e pepe. Cacio e pepe is actually something you can make at home pretty easily. And if you're on a joyful vegan trip, we have cacio e pepe without the dairy cheese. But cacio e pepe is a very famous Roman dish. It's made with pecorino cheese and black pepper. When cooking at home, you can make vegan versions, and they're so fantastic. So pepe means pepper. And as we've talked about in the past, when you go to Italy, right, and you look at restaurant menus, it will tell you exactly what's on the dish you're ordering. So you can certainly ask to confirm that there's no cheese, senza formaggio, right? You can say that. It's so fun how the Italians respond to that, because literally their response is, it doesn't say it on the menu. So if it doesn't say it on the menu, why are you asking me if there's cheese? But we're so used to it here in the United States. Everything comes with cheese, even though it doesn't say it on the freaking menu description. It's so maddening. And that's what I love about Italy, is that, if they have most menus have a description of the dish, it will tell you everything that's in it. And if it doesn't say cheese, there's no cheese. But you can still ask. I get it, right? But even like when, the Italians grate cheese on their pasta dishes, they're not using like gobs and gobs of Parmigiano, for instance. They're just using like a scant teaspoonful. And again, I'm not saying that they don't like their cheeses and they don't like their meats. They do. But when it comes to like how we think about pasta dishes, it's very different than how pasta is eaten and served in Italia. Now, one more pasta dish worth mentioning, because it pertains to Rome very specifically, is Fettuccine Alfredo, which is something most Americans know very well as creamy, cheesy sauce tossed with fettuccine pasta. It was actually born in Italy, precisely in Rome. But the truth is that Fettuccine Alfredo did not take off in Italy as it did in the US. And there are only 2 restaurants you can order it from in Rome. Just it's the only place you can get it. Both of which claim to be the authentic one with the most traditional recipe. But yeah, like you won't find them on the menu in the rest of Italy, in any menu, in any restaurant, with the exception of probably like very touristy restaurants, low quality touristy restaurants catering to Americans. Not that matters to you if you're vegan, because you're not going to find a vegan version of this, because you can barely find a non-vegan version. So you're not going to find the vegan version. But I thought you'd be interested in that little bit of trivia. It's really not eaten by Italians. The American version is very different from the original Italian one. In the American one, I mentioned there's the cream, there's garlic, there's butter, there's Parmesan cheese. But the Italian version, you would simply toss the pasta in butter and Parmigiano Reggiano, right? Parmesan. No cream. There wouldn't be cream. You mix it into a creamy consistency. It's more like a cacio e pepe. But the way Americans eat it, it's like buttery and creamy and cheesy and whatever. But you can make your own vegan version at home. Sure, you might already do that. Unless you're on a vegan tour and working with a vegan chef, it's unlikely you're going to find a vegan version of cacio e pepe in a restaurant. But fun to play with these things at home. And while pizza is, of course, served in Rome, There are variations of this famous southern staple that are specific to Rome, such as pizza Bianca, white pizza. White pizza in the US refers to a pizza covered with cheese without any sauce. But that's not what pizza Bianca is in Rome, in Roma. It's basically fresh baked focaccia with nothing more than some olive oil, some salt, maybe some sesame seeds or rosemary. It's basically focaccia, but it's called pizza Bianca in Rome. Bakers will often offer small pieces to children when their parents are buying bread. It's wonderful on its own, and it can be filled. It can be made into a sandwich. It's usually vegan, plant-based, so you can find that when you're in Rome, pizza Bianca. And speaking of pizza, there's another type invented in Rome that's called pizza Altalio, or pizza al tronco. It's Italian for pizza by the slice. It literally means by the cut. Pizza al taglio. Tagliare means to cut. The first pizza al taglio was baked in Rome in the late 1950s, and it was topped with olive oil and tomato sauce. That was the original pizza al taglio, vegan. But now it's just, it's any kind of meat and any cheese on it. But one of the things that distinguishes it is that it's baked in rectangular trays, and it's sold by the weight. It's basically Roman street food, and it's fantastic. So you can go find just pizza by the slice, pizza al taglio, and you should be able to find a really nice vegan version of that. As for other breads and bread type dishes in Rome, in Lazio, of course, bread has been a staple since ancient Rome, since the ancient Romans were there. Even the poorest person in ancient Rome would have had access to bread. And we have frescoes and pottery depicting bread and bread making by bakers to prove that. We have preserved carbonized bread loaves. We even have a recipe for bread from Cato the Elder from 200 BC. He was a senator, he was a farmer, and he recorded this simple recipe, and including some good advice about hygiene. Wash your hands and bowl thoroughly. Pour coarse flour into the bowl. Add water gradually and knead thoroughly. When you have kneaded well, form and bake under an earthenware cover. So you could just do it. It's just today. Like we could still do that. It still works today. So bread is hugely prevalent, obviously, in Rome. And by the way, if you're interested in words in the English language that come from the Latin word for bread, pan, and the Old English word for bread, loaf, which was laugh in Old English. Check out the episode called Breaking Bread, Words from the Staff of Life here on the Food for Thought podcast. It's absolutely fascinating how many English words are built from our words for bread, including lady, including lord, and company, and companion. You see the P-A-N in there, and company, and accompany, and companion, and pantry, and many more. There's also Panforte, which is an Italian dessert from central Italy, but in the region of Tuscany. So we're going to get there soon. We'll talk about Panforte, but go listen to that episode. It's fascinating, in my opinion. I mean, I'm not saying I'm fascinating. I'm saying the history of the words is fascinating. So if you're interested in that, go listen to that episode, Breaking Bread. So you'll definitely find lots of different breads in Rome. I'm not going to name every specific one, but there is one specific to the region called Chiriola Bread, Ciriola, Chiriola, which is on tables throughout Lazio. I've included a photo of it. I'm sure you've seen it. It's distinct for its oblong shape, looks like a football. And during World War II, the Chiriola was listed among the rationed foods that the fascist government guaranteed to the people as a right to stave off hunger. And so you can still find this in bakeries throughout Lazio. And finally, we have the Cornetto, which means little horn in Italian, Cornetto. Cornetto. And if you picture a croissant, you're picturing a cornetto. In central Italy, the pastry is known as cornetto. In the north, it's referred to as brioche, right? So, but that's the way to think of cornetti. It's a cross between a croissant and brioche, and it comprises a quintessential Italian breakfast at a Roman bar. Caffè e cornetto. Now, you'll be able to find vegan versions in vegan restaurants throughout Rome. So go look that up. They're fantastic. They're wonderful. They're croissants. Cornetto. Go find your vegan version in Rome. And as for our final treat, even though it originated in Sicily, you'll definitely find gelato all over Rome. for better or for worse, there's a gelateria like every corner in Rome, and so many of them will have vegan versions. In fact, what I have found on my trips to gelato shops all over Italy is that the most vegan flavors are the best ones. And they're my favorite ones, like cioccolato, chocolate. You've got hazelnut, pistachio, and you've got fragola, strawberry. They're like fruit. The fruit ones are usually vegan, but not all. But these nut-based ones and the chocolate one, it's the best chocolate gelato. It's like the best ice cream I've ever had in my life is chocolate gelato in Italy. I exaggerate not. I just don't. So ask for the ones that are vegan or senza latte. Many of them will be noted. You'll find that most gelateria, like they note what's vegan. Now there's sorbetto. You can get sorbetto, but sorbetto is just fruit based. It's not creamy, delicious gelato. So yeah, get sorbetto if you want. Like, and a lot of sorbetto is going to be vegan, but like get gelato. Like it's amazing and it's creamy and it's fantastic. And you can find gelato senza latte all over Italy, especially in the south and central. As you get farther north, you do find more gelato. You find a lot of gelateria like not selling vegan, and a lot of them will be made with eggs. So just ask, but oh my God, that's just one of my favorite memories of Rome. It's one of my favorite memories of Italy. It's one of the reasons I can't wait to go back. Like, just give me gelato for dinner. I'm not kidding. It's so good. Okay, so let's move from Lazio. Let's go a little farther north to the region of Umbria, one of my absolutely favorite places in Italia. It's one of my favorite places for a few reasons. First of all, it was the region in Italy I spent the most amount of time on our first trip to Italy. Towns like Orvieto and Gubbio and Perugia, and especially Assisi. It's also when we first stayed at Montali Country House, a beautiful agriturismo that was 100% vegetarian. They made everything vegan for us. It's this wonderful couple. They're actually doing plant-based meats now, like as a business, not like, I don't know how much the agriturismo is doing because I don't know how much they were closed because of COVID. But they're just this fabulous couple. They might even be vegan now. Like Country House Montali itself might be vegan if you can get there before they close, because they're going to retire someday. I just highly recommend it. So come on one of our trips, take a side trip over to Country House Montali. But it was a place that so inspired us when we went there that when we bought the house we're in now 10 years ago, which isn't anything like Montali Country House in that it's not made of stone. Country House Montali is made of stone. And it's, it's on several acres of property, but it was just inspiring because our house is kind of Mediterranean style. It's Italian style. It sits up on a hill like Montali. And so I named our house Little Montali. So like, that's what we call our house. Like, and when I invite people over to our house, like when I send out an evite to our friends, I don't just say, here's our address. I don't just say, come to our house. It's come to Little Montali. Like, that's our house. That's our name. And it was inspired by Montali Country House Montali. The first thing we did was plant an olive tree. Montali has a whole proper olive grove, and it's just been our little Italian cottage up on a hill, like Montali, Little Montali. Michiko came into the room not very long ago, and she found a little thing, like a little like twisty tie on the floor, and she's now just chasing it all around, which is adorable. I don't think you can hear her because she just knocked it down the stairs. So I don't know if she'll be back. Okay. So those are some of the things I love about Umbria. Another aspect of Umbria, it's more forested than the other areas, which is why you have a lot of mushroom foraging, why you also have hunting, but so you've got the good and the bad. But I love Umbria. It's just so beautiful. It's much more rustic and again, forested, a lot more trees, versus Tuscany where you have a lot more, you can just see agriculture for, miles and miles, right? Another aspect is that I fell in love with the town of Assisi. Like you can't not fall in love with Assisi when you go. It's just incredible. I'm not saying this to embarrass you or to embarrass myself, but as I just said that, tears came to my eyes, and I'm not kidding. That's why I had to say it, because I was surprised myself. It's so stunningly beautiful. It's so stunningly moving. It's this incredibly beautiful hill town. It was the birthplace of St. Francis. He's the patron saint of Italy. And of course, he's the saint most associated with animals and compassion. The Basilica of St. Francis is a massive 2-level church. It was consecrated in 1253. There's 13th century frescoes in it portraying the life of St. Francis. They've been attributed to Giotto, like from the 13th century and 15th century. He's buried there in the stone sarcophagus. It's a magnificent place, and it's a must-see, in my opinion, so conde me. So I just love it. And it's why Assisi is the only non-Tuscan town when we do our joyful vegan trips to Tuscany. We do go to Assisi, even though it's in Umbria. It's the only place. It's a little farther afield, but it is worth it because I'm not just doing it for me because I love it and I want to go back. It's because it's incredible. Now Michiko is on her little scratchy post in my office. We know it's lunchtime when the kitties come up because they've been sleeping in the morning, and they know that I get up to go have lunch outside, and it's when they come with me, although Charlie's not going out right now because he hurt his foot. Another story for another time. And now they're going to fight. Okay, stop it. They're both in the room because it's lunchtime. So okay, back to Assisi. We go to Assisi because it's incredible and it's magical, and we're going back this June. So if you are interested in coming to Tuscany with me, I know I'm giving the heavy sell here, but it is just magical and I want you to experience it. So joyfulvegantrips.com. We will talk more about details when we're in the Tuscany portion of our discussion today, but you can see all the itinerary at joyfulvegantrips.com. So Umbria. It's the only landlocked region in peninsular Italy. It's situated between Tuscany and Lazio. It's known as Il Cuore Verde d'Italia, the green heart of Italy, because of its ample valleys, the forests I mentioned, the green hills, and its relative lack of industrialization. Cooking here is definitely one of the most local of all the cuisines in Italy. The Umbrians just really have stayed true to their kind of local produce. And of course, animal flesh and fluids are prevalent here as well. We're not going to talk about that. But the Umbrian diet is rich in vegetables. It's rich in funghi, like other parts of central and southern Italy. You've got simple, rustic cooking, but it tends to be overlooked, I think, when people think about cuisine in central Italy or Italy in general. But it has some distinct dishes of its own based on the food grown and foraged in the region. Forests play an important role, as I mentioned. It's renowned for its variety and quality of mushrooms. You've got porcini here, but you've also got truffles, tartufi. Black truffles are plentiful in this region. They make their way into many regional dishes, which we'll talk about. Chestnuts are grown widely here. We'll talk about some of that. We're going to talk about some of that here. We're going to also talk about that in Tuscany. Faro is loved by Umbrians. They make Faro the star of many salads and soups, and they grow it throughout the region. Umbria is also known for its locally grown lentils. They are traditionally eaten on New Year's Day to bring prosperity for the coming year. Perugia has become synonymous with baci parugina. It's a dark chocolate hazelnut kiss. It's called a bacio, means kiss, baci. Baci parugina. It's just think of a Hershey's Kiss and then increase the quality by tenfold. It's a really quality version of that, but they're basically little kisses and they're so delicious, and you can definitely find vegan versions throughout the area. And Umbria ranks as one of Italy's best olive producers. Wines are plentiful, so you've got a lot here that you've got in Tuscany, but I just think it's overlooked, and there's some really wonderful dishes that are specific to Umbria. So let's start with the food that Umbria is most known for, and that's black truffles, tartufi. If you want to experience the best black truffles on the planet, Umbria is the place to be. Umbria is the place to visit. Now we're talking about black truffles here, not white. White truffles grow in Italy, specifically in the northwest Piedmont region. So we're going to talk about them when we get there. We're going to talk about why they're so hard to find, why they're so expensive, but here we're talking about black truffles. They're a little less potent in aroma than white truffles. The aroma sticks around a little longer, and so the mushrooms are commonly mixed into kind of butters or sauces and other mushroom combinations. So black truffles are also much less expensive. They're about half the price of white truffles. So those are just a couple distinctions between the two, but we'll talk more about white truffles when we get up to the north. Something else I recommend if you're looking to add truffles to your cooking repertoire is truffle salt. You can find it in a lot of places. You'll notice the real thing when you can see the white salt with the black specks. The black specks are the black truffles. So good, so delicious. I keep it in the refrigerator. It can become flavorless. It can become rancid when stored in the cupboard. So I just keep it in the refrigerator, and less is more. Just like with the oil, which I'll talk about, one of my favorite things to do with either the oil I usually infuse into butter, but the salt, seriously, Michiko? Seriously? With the salt, I use for popcorn. So I use the truffle salt for popcorn, but I also use the infused butter that has the oil. So good. It's so good. It's a wonderful, wonderful condiment to have. She's playing with a bag. Maybe you can't hear it. I hope you can't. So that's truffle salt. So you can get black truffles. You can just shave them on some pasta dishes. You can get black salt. You can get, black truffle salt, and you can also get black truffle oil. The thing with the oils, the truffle oils, is that truffle oil is more commonly made with synthetically produced truffle flavoring because truffles are so rare and they're so expensive. So when you buy truffle oil, you really want to make sure you're looking to see that it's not just artificial flavors. And you can tell that from a couple different ways. First of all, you're going to look at the ingredients. If you see something that's called natural truffle aroma or truffle flavor, you don't have the real thing. If they don't mention real truffles, if they mention chemical ingredients, you don't have the real thing. There are no regulations that require a manufacturer to state whether the oil is made with real truffles or artificially created flavors. You have to rely on the integrity of the business to tell you whether the oil really is premium quality or not. So look at the label, look for those key things. If it's aroma or flavoring, it's not actual truffles. The price is also going to tell you that you're getting the real thing versus an artificial version. But get some good truffle oil and don't cook with it. Use it as a finishing oil on pasta, on pizza. Just use it and a little goes a long way. You'll have that oil. Keep it in the fridge. I keep mine in the fridge, which does mean that it does solidify, but I just kind of, thaw it out a little bit. But it's just wonderful. Now, if you're deciding between white truffle oil and black truffle oil is more robust. It's earthier than the white truffle oil. White truffle is a little higher noted. It has a bit higher notes like onions, whereas black truffle is a little more earthy. So you can find them in specialty stores, but look at the label. And same with black truffles. So you can find them in specialty stores. You can find them online. You can find them when you go to Italy, which is a wonderful gift. It's a wonderful gift to bring back to friends and family. And yeah, same thing. Just shave them on some pizza, shave them on some pasta, on some soup. Make a mushroom soup. It's a very common thing to shave some black truffles just onto a mushroom soup. The soup itself wouldn't be made from truffles. It would be made from other mushrooms, but to finish it, just put a little bit of a black truffles shaved or a little bit of a drizzle of the oil or a little bit of salt. So when you do this, you're basically enjoying authentic Umbrian cuisine, because in Umbria, it's very common to just pair a truffle mushroom sauce or a soup or a pasta with a few shavings of black truffles on top. A famous dish in Umbria is tagliatelle al tartufo, which is just as it sounds. It's tagliatelle pasta with black truffles. Tagliatelle al tartufo. Tartufo means truffle. Tartufi is truffles. So tagliatelle noodles, they tend to be made with chicken's eggs, so be sure to find an eggless version when you're shopping around, or just substitute it. You can substitute it for another wild noodle like a fettuccine or pappardelle. Another Umbrian pasta dish, or more specifically pasta, is strangozzi or stringozzi. And it's named for its resemblance to shoelaces because stringhe is Italian for strings. So you can call it stringozzi, you can call it strangozzi. Don't get too attached to either one, because depending on where you actually are in Umbria, they're called different things in different towns in Umbria. They're called umbricelli in Perugia. They're called Chiriole in Terni. By Lake Trasimeno, they're called anguillette. And in Orvieto, they're manifricoli. So, that's just amazing. These are just the towns in the different provinces in the region of Umbria, and they all have a different name for this one pasta. I love it. And the towns are really close to one another, but they all have their different names. So that should help you fully grasp how regional Italy is, right? How regionalized it is. The same pasta called 5 different things in towns just miles from one another. I love it. Strangozzi is also another good example of a long strand pasta that tends to be more prevalent in southern and central Italy versus the north. So you've got fettuccine, you've got pappardelle, you've got linguine, you've got bucatini, spaghetti we talked about, lasagna, strangozzi. These are all long strand pastas. Another kind of generalization to create some distinctions. We talked about the shapes in the south. You've got this long strand in the central part, and doesn't mean they don't have shapes in the central part, doesn't mean they don't have shapes in the north. Just generally speaking, that's what you can find. And strangozzi from Umbria. And Umbria, strangozzi is often paired with local black truffles. And so another well-known Umbrian dish is similar to tagliatelle al tartufo is strangozzi alla spolatina. And this gives you another hint that it's an Umbrian dish because, as we said, you often have the name of the town in the name of the dish. And so this is strangozzi alla spolatina. Spoletta is a town in the region of Umbria. So Spoletina is the name of the dish. Spoletta is a town in the region of Umbria. And it's made either with black truffle shavings or tomato sauce. One more famous pasta from Umbria I want to tell you about, and that's strozza pretti. Long, twisted pasta, also made con tortufi. That's also made with truffles. And it translates to priest stranglers. Yeah, strozza Preti being priests, priest stranglers. It originated in Emilia-Romagna, which some people actually include in the central region, but I'm including Emilia-Romagna in the north. But there are many versions of this pasta all around the country. So in the southern regions, in Campania, in Calabria, you've got strangola preti, which is also strangled priest, which is a type of potato gnocchi. In Tuscany, the same name is used for gnocchi made of spinach and ricotta. I'm working on my own vegan version of that. In Umbria and in Lazio, and you've got strozza preti, and that's the name of this long pasta, similar to spaghetti and tagliatelle. We'll talk about the tale behind that name when we get to the north, particularly when we get to Emilia-Romagna. Now let's move from pasta to grains, even though, pasta is technically made from a grain, but let's move from pasta to farro. Farro is an ancient grain originating in the Fertile Crescent, and it has been found in the tombs of Egyptian kings. It is said to have been fed to the Roman legions. It has been around for a very long time. And in good Roman fashion, they brought it back to Italy. They made it their own, and it has now been a staple in Italian cuisine for centuries. In Italy, it's commonly grown in the regions of Lazio, Umbria, Toscana, Le Marche. So you've got basically the central part. Faro is mostly a central Italian food. If you've never had it, it's delicious. It's shaped like rice with a golden brown hue. It's got a nutty flavor. It reminds me of barley, but better. It's nutrient dense. It's perfect for soups. And there is a famous soup in Umbria called Umbrian Faro Soup. So you can get that when you're in Umbria. It's a wonderful, thick, dense, hearty, vegetable Faro-based soup with, you can have Swiss chard, porcini mushrooms, anything that's in season, anything that's in Umbria. So Faro is a very, very prevalent grain here in the central part of Italy. Another traditional dish made from grains, hailing from the region of Umbria, is impasto, and it's made with a combination of cornmeal, polenta, which we're going to talk more about when we get to the north, olive oil, onions, garlic, tomatoes, and cannellini beans. It's seasoned with sage and rosemary and black pepper. The name of this dish, impastoiata, is from the word impastare, which means to knead. And that describes the final result of this polenta dish, basically being similar to a dough, but in a soupy version of that. So you've got stewed beans that are added to the polenta while it's cooking. You can see a picture of it online. And it's served warm and in individual soup bowls. Of course, a little olive oil is drizzled on top of it at the end. I've had a version of this in Umbria with polenta. Polenta just means mush. It just means a mash of grains. Soft, cooked down. It could be oats. It could be, corn in the sense of the polenta we think about. But I've had a version with pea flour from wild peas that were dried and then made into a flour. And it was cooked with water and stirred and stirred and stirred with garlic-infused olive oil. And it's served like a very thick soup. It's absolutely delicious. And again, very much this cucina povera, like very much this very basic, really simple cuisine of the people is what it is. Now, we haven't talked about lentils yet. Another staple crop of this region. There are some famous lentils in this region, particularly from a region called Castelluccio. There's a lenticchia di Castelluccio di Norcia, which is named after the village of Castelluccio. It's a high settlement up in the Apennine Mountains. And this lentil refers to a particular one that's grown in around Perugia. It's a very small lentil. It's tiny. The color ranges from a veined green to a light chestnut. It's really pretty. And it's very tender and it's very small. So they don't take a long time to cook. And they're very earthy. They're used in a lot of soups and stews. And it's fun, right? Because we didn't really talk about lentils in southern Italy, right? We didn't really talk about beans either. Outside of chickpeas, garbanzo beans, ceci, we're going to talk about beans as we moved to our next region and our final region in central Italy. But we're not going to do that right now because I'm absolutely knackered. I cannot talk anymore. And I really want to focus on Tuscany. It's going to be just a continuation of our central Italian conversation, but there's lots to say about Tuscany. Not that there's not a lot to say about the other regions. I'm not favoring Tuscany because it's the most famous at all. It's just I'm tired and I cannot go on. And I want you to soak in everything you've heard. I could probably have done this in a very different way, spaced it all out, stretched it all out, done one episode at a time. I don't tend to do that. Maybe I'm crazy. I think I am. I probably am because the amount of time I put into these episodes, like it's wonderful. I love it, but I hope you enjoy it because it is a lot of work and I just want to give you everything I can give you because I don't know what tomorrow holds. So if you're interested in these episodes and you really love them, then please just become a sponsor, become a supporter, and definitely share them and give ratings and reviews. At this point, I am going to stop talking and tell you we've got lots of really fun things to talk about in Tuscany, and then we're going to go to the north. But until then, take this all in, soak this in, go listen to the Southern Italy episode, listen to this one again. If you are a supporter, if you're a sponsor of the podcast, you get the written transcript and you're going to get exactly what I've been saying today. It's a full-on word-for-word transcript. There's even mistakes in it, right? So you're going to get exactly what I say in this episode, and there's a lot to take in. So you've got some work to do too, listening to these episodes. In the meantime, join me over at joyfulvegan.com. Join me in one of my online cooking classes. Let me know what classes you're looking to take. I am probably going to do cooking classes on the different cuisines of Italy, and that's going to be super fun. So in the meantime, enjoy this. I hope you realize how plant-based, vegan, friendly Italy is, and how there's so many foods that we can try and enjoy without hurting animals. For the animals, this is Colleen Patrick Goodrow. Thanks for listening.